Captain Yuntai sat in his command chair aboard the survey vessel, Crystal Wing, watching the blue-green planet rotate slowly on his view screen. Earth, another primitive world in the Outer Rim territories. He'd catalogued dozens just like it during his 20-year career with the Nexus Trade Empire. "Initial scans complete, sir," reported his science officer, adjusting the crystalline interface with practiced ease. "Carbon-based bipeds, technological development approximately 2 centuries behind Galactic standard. Chemical propulsion only. They've managed to reach their natural satellite a few times, but barely." Yuntai nodded, making notes on his data pad. The Nexus had perfected this process long ago. Find primitive worlds, catalog their resources, then return when they were ripe for trade partnerships. It was a system that had worked flawlessly across the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Down on Earth's surface, Dr. Haoyun Park was having trouble sleeping. The radio telescope arrays she managed had been picking up strange signals for the past week. Not the usual cosmic background radiation or pulsar emissions she was used to studying. These were different, organized, artificial. She'd tried explaining her findings to her colleagues, but they dismissed her concerns. Probably just interference from a satellite, they said, or maybe solar activity. But Ha-Un knew better. She'd been studying space for 15 years, and she'd never seen anything like these patterns. The signals were too precise, too structured. They reminded her of scanning protocols, like someone was methodically examining Earth from orbit. When she'd suggested the possibility of alien contact, her department head had actually laughed. "Haoyun, you've been watching too many science fiction movies," he'd said. "Focus on real science, not fantasy." But Haoyun couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something intelligent, something that didn't belong in their solar system. Meanwhile, Admiral Hyunwoo Kim was deep underground in a facility that didn't officially exist. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex had been expanded significantly over the past decades, its true purpose known only to a select few. The public thought it was just another military installation. They had no idea it housed humanity's most classified project. "Sir, we're receiving confirmation from Observatory 7, his aide reported. "Dr. Park's readings match our own. The object is definitely artificial, and it's been conducting systematic scans of major population centers." Hyunwoo studied the classified reports spread across his desk. For 50 years, world governments had been quietly preparing for this moment. Not openly, of course. The public wasn't ready to know that their leaders had been expecting alien contact since the 1970s. But certain people in certain positions had been making preparations. The evidence had been mounting for decades. UFO sightings that couldn't be explained away. Technology recoveries that had accelerated human development far beyond what should have been natural. Materials that didn't match anything found on Earth. All of it carefully catalogued, studied, and reverse-engineered in facilities like this one. "What's our current defensive status?" Hyunwoo asked. "Project Prometheus has 47 installations. Online. Lunar Base is operational with a full complement. The Mars outposts are still under construction, but they'll have limited defensive capabilities if needed." Hyunwoo nodded grimly. The public thought humanity had barely made it to the moon. They had no idea that secret bases had been established throughout the solar system over the past 2 decades. Mining operations on asteroids, research stations on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, all of it funded through black budgets and classified programs. Back on the Crystal Wing, Yuntai was wrapping up his survey. Earth was exactly what it appeared to be. A primitive world with abundant resources and a population that had barely developed space travel. Their largest vessels could barely escape their own gravity well. Recommended classification. His science. Officer asked. "Development Level 2, Yuntai replied without hesitation. "Standard 50-year monitoring period before initial contact. Market for resource extraction planning." The science officer entered the data into their central database. In 50 years, Earth would be ready for the Nexus treatment. First would come the trade offers, technology in exchange for raw materials. Then would come the dependency. Earth would become reliant on Nexus technology, unable to function without it. Finally would come the integration, where Earth would become just another client world in the vast Nexus Empire. It was a process that had been repeated countless times across the galaxy. The Nexus didn't conquer worlds through violence. They conquered them through economics. It was much cleaner, much more efficient, and it left the local population intact to continue working. As the Crystal Wing prepared to depart, Yuntai felt satisfied with another successful survey. Earth would make a fine addition to the Nexus in a few decades. The humans seemed industrious enough, and the planet had excellent mineral deposits. What he didn't realize was that his ship's departure was being tracked by sensors he never detected. Deep space monitoring stations that had been built specifically to watch for his kind. And in underground facilities across Earth, people were already preparing for his return. The countdown had begun. Captain Jiho Lee stood on the bridge of the Sol Defender, watching the massive crystalline ships materialize at the edge of the solar system. 43 vessels, each one the size of a city block, their hulls gleaming like polished diamonds against the black of space. They're exactly on schedule, his tactical officer reported. 47 years, 2 months, and 16 days since first contact. Jiho nodded grimly. Humanity had been counting down every single day. The alien survey ship's departure had been the starting gun for the most intensive military buildup in human history. What the Nexus didn't know was that humans were very good at keeping secrets. Fleet Commander Zelton felt confident as his armada approached the primitive world. His intelligence reports showed a species that had barely advanced since their last visit. A few more chemical rockets, some basic satellites, nothing that could threaten his fleet. Broadcasting standard compliance message, his communications officer announced. The message that went out across all frequencies was the same one the Nexus had used for millennia. Simple, direct, and non-negotiable. Primitive species of Sol 3, you will immediately cease all industrial activity and prepare for resource assessment. Compliance will ensure your survival. Resistance will not be tolerated. Down on Earth, billions of people heard the message through their televisions, radios, and smartphones. Panic spread through major cities as people realized they were not alone in the universe. But in certain government facilities, people had been waiting for this moment for decades. President Min Jung Park stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors and scientists. She'd been briefed on humanity's true capabilities the day she took office. The revelation had been staggering. "Admiral, what's our status?" she asked. Admiral Hyunwoo Kim consulted his tablet. "All defensive platforms are online. Lunar base reports ready. The Mars stations are at 70% capacity. Our deep space assets are in position. And our allies. The coalition is standing by. 17 species have confirmed their support when the time comes." President Park nodded. The past 47 years hadn't just been about building weapons. Human diplomats had been secretly contacting other species oppressed by the Nexus Empire. Turns out, humanity wasn't the only race that resented being pushed around. Back in space, Captain Jiho received the alien ultimatum with cold satisfaction. His ship was positioned perfectly, hidden in the shadow of an asteroid that had been specially equipped for this purpose. Around the solar system, dozens of other human vessels waited in similar concealment. "Sir, should we respond to their message?" his communications officer asked. "Yes," Jiho said quietly. "Send them our standard response." The message that went back to the Nexus fleet was brief and clear. "Unknown vessels, you have entered human space without permission. You have 30 minutes to withdraw from our system. This is your only warning." On the bridge of the Nexus flagship, laughter erupted from the crew. The primitive humans actually thought they could threaten the mighty Nexus Empire. Commander Zelthan had seen this before. Some species tried to bluff. When faced with superior technology, it never worked. "Sir, our sensors show only minimal defensive capabilities," his science officer reported. "A few orbital platforms, some basic interceptors, nothing that could threaten even one of our ships." What the Nexus sensors couldn't detect were the stealth modifications human engineers had developed. Technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien vessels over the decades, then improved upon with human ingenuity. Every human ship was wrapped in adaptive camouflage, that made it virtually invisible to standard scanning systems. Commander Zelthan decided to make an example. Target their primary orbital facility, destroy it. The Nexus weapons fired, their energy beams striking lunar base's outer sections. The explosion was visible from Earth, a bright flash against the dark surface of the Moon. 300 human civilians died in that attack, including Dr. Soo-Jin Kim, who had been monitoring alien communications right up until the end. The moment the base was destroyed, every human military installation in the solar system received the same two-word message: execute Prometheus. Captain Yoo-Jin Han was commanding the stealth squadron, hidden behind Jupiter's largest moon. She'd been waiting for this moment her entire career. Her parents had been part of the original contact team that had studied the first alien crash. They'd died never knowing whether their work would save humanity. All ships, this is Phoenix Leader, she broadcast on the secure channel. Light them up. Across the solar system, human vessels dropped their stealth fields and opened fire. The Nexus fleet suddenly found themselves surrounded by enemies they never saw coming. Kinetic weapons launched from hidden platforms struck their ships with the force of small nuclear weapons. But the real shock wasn't the surprise attack. It was the coordination. Every human ship, from the massive dreadnoughts to the smallest fighters, moved with perfect synchronization. They shared targeting data, tactical information, and strategic commands through quantum communication networks that operated faster than light. Commander Zelthan watched in horror as his supposedly superior fleet was torn apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They're primitives." His science officer was frantically analyzing the human attacks. "Sir, their technology, it's based on our own designs, but somehow improved. Their weapons are more efficient, their coordination is perfect, and their ships are using stealth systems we can't penetrate." In 6 hours, 38 Nexus ships were either destroyed or crippled. The 5 survivors, including Zelthan's flagship, limped away from the battle zone. But before they could escape, human engineers had burned a message into their hull plating using industrial lasers. The message was written in 17 different galactic languages. "Humanity does not kneel." As the damaged Nexus ships jumped to hyperspace, Captain Jiho stood on his bridge and looked out at the wreckage floating in space. The first battle was over, but he knew this was just the beginning. The Nexus Empire wouldn't accept this defeat. Quietly, but for the first time in human history, they had proven they could stand against the galaxy's greatest power. And win. Captain Yoo-Jin Han watched the Nexus fleet stumble away from Earth through her tactical display. Her stealth squadron had remained hidden throughout the first battle, waiting for this exact moment. The aliens thought they were retreating to safety, but they were actually flying straight into humanity's second trap. "Phoenix Squadron, maintain radio silence," she whispered into her headset. "Let them think they're safe." Her ship, the Ghost of Busan, was invisible to Nexus sensors. Human engineers had spent decades perfecting stealth technology, using materials recovered from alien crash sites and improving them with Earth's most advanced manufacturing techniques. What the aliens had created, humans had made better. The surviving Nexus ships were damaged and confused. Commander Zelthan's flagship limped through space, its crystalline hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere. He couldn't understand what had happened. His intelligence reports had been perfect. Earth was supposed to be defenseless. "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from the other survivors," his communications officer reported. "The Shard of Victory has lost main power. Crystal Hammer is venting drive plasma." Zelthan felt sick. In 3,000 years of Nexus expansion, no primitive world had ever inflicted such devastating losses on an Imperial fleet. His career was over. Worse than that, he might face execution for this failure. "Set course for the nearest Nexus base," he ordered. "Maximum speed." What he didn't know was that Captain Yoo-Jin had been following alien communication protocols for years. Every Nexus military frequency, every encryption code, every tactical procedure had been studied and decoded by human intelligence. They knew exactly where the aliens were going. "All ships, this is Phoenix Leader. Eugene transmitted on the ultra-secure quantum channel. Target coordinates confirmed. The aliens are heading for Station Omega-7 in the Kepler system. Intercept course plotted and uploaded. Her squadron consisted of 12 ships, each one packed with technology that would have seemed impossible just 50 years ago. Fusion drives that could accelerate to incredible speeds, quantum computers that could calculate hyperspace jumps with perfect accuracy, and weapons that hit harder than anything the Nexus had ever faced. But the real advantage wasn't the technology. It was the people using it. Lieutenant Minho Park sat at the tactical station aboard Eugene's ship. He was 26 years old, born after the first alien contact. He'd grown up knowing that humanity was not alone, training for this war since. He was old enough to hold a weapon. "Captain, I'm reading massive Nexus reinforcements at the target station," he reported. "Looks like a full battle group. 37 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers." Eugene smiled coldly. Perfect. The more aliens they could hit at once, the better. Back on Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo Kim was coordinating the battle from his underground command center. Holographic displays showed every human ship in the solar system, their positions updated in real time through quantum communication networks. "Sir, Phoenix Squadron is approaching the target," his aide reported. "Should we alert the other battle groups?" "Not yet," Hyunwoo replied. "Let Captain Han make her demonstration first. The galaxy needs to see what happens when you attack humanity." The human ships dropped out of hyperspace right on top of the Nexus station. To the aliens, it looked like the void of space had suddenly given birth to a pack of predators. 12 human vessels materialized from nothing, their weapons already charged and targeting systems locked. Station Commander Vextala barely had time to sound the alarm before the humans opened fire. Kinetic rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed slammed into his station's shields. The energy barriers that had protected Nexus installations for centuries lasted exactly 47 seconds. "Impossible!" Vexitala screamed. "Our shields are military grade. How are they penetrating so easily?" His science officer was frantically analyzing the human weapons. "Sir, they're using our own technology against us. Somehow they've reverse-engineered our shield frequencies and designed their weapons to exploit." "The weaknesses!" Captain Eugene's voice cut through the alien panic on all frequencies. She spoke in perfect Galactic standard, the language of interstellar commerce. "Attention, Nexus forces. You attacked our home, you killed our people. Now you learn what happens when you threaten humanity." The human ships moved like a pack of wolves, each one perfectly coordinated with the others. They didn't just attack. Randomly. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver planned. It was like watching a deadly dance performed by masters who had practiced for decades. The Nexus ships tried to fight back, but their weapons couldn't even find targets. Human stealth technology made their vessels flicker in and out of existence, on alien sensors. One moment a human ship would be directly ahead, the next it would appear behind them, weapons blazing. Lieutenant Min Ho watched his targeting computer track multiple alien vessels simultaneously. The quantum processing cores could calculate attack patterns and defensive responses faster than any biological brain. But the real power came from the network that connected every human ship. "Phoenix 2, I'm painting the cruiser for you," called out. "Target their reactor housing." "Copy that, Phoenix leader. Target acquired and firing." The massive Nexus cruiser shuddered as human weapons found their mark. Its reactor containment failed, and the ship died in a brief, brilliant explosion that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Commander Zelton's damaged flagship arrived just in time to watch the slaughter. His reinforcements, the ships, that were supposed to rescue him, were being systematically destroyed by a force 1/3 their size. "Sir, should we engage?" his tactical officer asked weakly. "Are you insane?" Zelton snapped. "Look at them. They're not just fighting us, they're playing with us." It was true. The human ships weren't just winning, they were making it look easy. They moved with casual confidence, like apex predators hunting frightened prey. Every alien ship that tried to fight back was destroyed within minutes. Every attempt to retreat was cut off by human vessels that seemed to know exactly where they were going. Within 2 hours, the Nexus battle group was completely annihilated. 37 alien ships reduced to debris and scrap metal. The humans hadn't lost a single vessel. As the last enemy ship exploded, Captain Yu Jin opened a channel. To any Nexus forces within range, "This message is for the Nexus Empire," she said calmly. "You came to our world thinking we were weak. You killed our people thinking there would be no consequences. You were wrong on both counts. Humanity remembers every attack. We remember every insult, and we remember every life you've taken. Tell your leaders that we're coming for them. Tell them that the age of Nexus dominance is over, and tell them that humanity has just gotten started." The emergency session of the Nexus High Council had been going on for 18 hours straight. In the great crystal chamber on their homeworld, 7 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a table that had witnessed 3 millennia of conquest and expansion. Today, for the first time in their recorded history, they were discussing defeat. Supreme Chancellor Mordeth slammed his crystalline fist on the table, causing hairline cracks to spread across its surface. "How?" he demanded. "How does a primitive species destroy 2 of our battle groups?" Fleet Admiral Kexthan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The holographic displays around them showed the devastating aftermath of humanity's attacks. 75 Nexus ships destroyed, thousands of their finest warriors dead, all at the hands of a species they had classified as barely space-capable. "Our intelligence was flawed," Kexthan admitted reluctantly. "The humans have been hiding their true capabilities for decades. They possess technology that rivals our own, possibly exceeds it in some areas." "Impossible," snapped Trade Minister Velsara. "We've been monitoring their communications for 50 years. We know exactly what they're capable of." "Apparently, we don't," Kexthan replied grimly. "They've been conducting military operations in complete communications blackout. Quantum encryption we can't break, stealth technology we can't detect, and coordination protocols that make our best tactical computers look primitive." Supreme Chancellor Mordeth stood and began pacing around the chamber. The Nexus Empire controlled over 4,000 star systems. They had subjugated hundreds of species through a combination of economic pressure and military superiority. No one had ever successfully resisted them before. "What are you recommending?" he asked. "Full mobilization," Kexthan said without hesitation. "Every ship, every weapon, every warrior in the Empire. We crush this human uprising before it spreads to our other client species." Back on Earth, Colonel Seowa Kim was having the time of her life. The Nexus response was exactly what human strategists had predicted. Overwhelming force applied without subtlety or intelligence. It was almost insulting how predictable they were. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements throughout Nexus space," her intelligence officer reported. "Looks like they're pulling ships from garrison duties across the galaxy." Seowa grinned. "Perfect. How many ships total?" "Conservative estimate, 3,000 vessels. They're mobilizing everything they have." "Outstanding," Seowa replied. "Send word to Admiral Kim. Tell him the aliens are taking the bait exactly as planned." What the Nexus leadership didn't understand was that humans had been studying their empire for decades. Every trade route, every supply line, every military protocol had been analyzed and catalogued. Human intelligence knew the Nexus better than they knew themselves. While the aliens were gathering their massive fleet, human industrial complexes throughout the solar system were working at maximum capacity. Automated factories on Luna, asteroid mining operations, and hidden shipyards were producing vessels at a rate that defied economic logic. Dr. Ha-Yun Park, now Director of Advanced Technologies, watched the production reports with satisfaction. 50 years of preparation were finally paying off. The industrial base humanity had built in secret was larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Production report, Director," her assistant announced. "We're completing 1 heavy cruiser every 6 hours. Fighter production is at 200 units per day. The new quantum communication arrays are being installed across all vessels." "And the special projects?" Ha-Un asked. "Project Prometheus is ahead of schedule. We'll have 47 installations online within the month. Project Phoenix is ready for field testing. And Project Nemesis..." Her assistant paused. "Well, let's just say the aliens are going to get a very unpleasant surprise. The most disturbing intelligence coming from human space wasn't about their weapons or their ships. It was about their attitude. Nexus spies intercepted human military communications and found something they'd never encountered before, a species that was actually excited about going to war. Human soldiers weren't just preparing for battle, they were looking forward to it. Training videos showed troops practicing assault tactics while laughing and joking with each other. Pilots ran combat simulations like they were playing games. Officers discussed battle strategies with the enthusiasm most species reserved for. Recreational activities. Admiral Hyunwoo Kim stood in his command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing human fleets throughout the galaxy. What the Nexus didn't know was that humanity had been secretly establishing bases in neutral systems for over a decade. Sir, Ghost Fleet 7 reports they're in position near the Vega system, his communications officer announced. Admiral Chen's task force has reached the Centauri cluster. Captain Eugene squadron is standing by at coordinates Omega 12. Hyunwoo nodded. While the Nexus was pulling ships from across their empire to create one massive fleet, humans were spreading their forces throughout the galaxy. When the war began in earnest, Nexus territory would be hit from dozens of directions simultaneously. "What's our current force assessment?" he asked. 1,800 ships ready for immediate deployment. Another 600 in final preparation stages. We're actually ahead of our original timeline. The Nexus had made a critical error in their understanding of human psychology. They assumed that, like every other species they'd conquered, humans would be intimidated by overwhelming force. What they didn't realize was that humans had been dreaming of this war for 50 years. Every human child born after first contact had grown up knowing that aliens existed and that they were hostile. An entire generation had been raised on stories of the coming conflict. They hadn't been traumatized by the knowledge of alien threats. They'd been motivated by it. Lieutenant Minho Park, now promoted to commander after his performance in the previous battles, was leading a squadron of the newest human fighters. His pilots were all in their 20s, born and raised for this war. "Listen up, people," he said during their pre-mission briefing. "Intelligence reports the Nexus is throwing everything they have at us. 3,000 ships, their best commanders, their most advanced weapons." His pilots looked at each other and grinned. "Sir," one of them asked, "does that mean we finally get to use the fun toys?" Minho smiled back. "Oh yes. Command has authorized full deployment of all experimental weapons. Project Nemesis is greenlit. We're about to show the galaxy what happens when you pick a fight with humanity." The Nexus fleet was impressive by any standard. 3,000 vessels arranged in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls glittering like stars. Fleet Admiral Kexton stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against such overwhelming power. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," Kexton ordered. The image that appeared on his screen was of a young human woman in military uniform, Admiral Sujin Lee, the new commander of Earth's defense forces. "Greetings, Fleet Admiral," she said politely. "I'm calling to inform you that you have one. Opportunity to withdraw your forces and return to Nexus space. This offer will not be repeated." Kextan laughed. "Human, you are facing the might of the entire Nexus Empire. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Admiral Lee smiled, and Kexton felt a chill run through his crystalline body. There was something in that smile that reminded him of a predator showing its teeth. "Admiral," she said softly, "you have no idea what you've just walked into." "Admiral." Sujin Lee cut the transmission and turned to her command staff. The massive Nexus fleet hanging in space beyond Earth looked impressive, but she knew something they didn't. This wasn't going to be a battle, it was going to be a demonstration. "All stations report ready, Admiral," her tactical officer announced. "Ghost fleets are in position throughout Nexus space. Operation Shattered Crown is go for execution." Sujin nodded. For 14 months, human forces had been fighting a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Not a war of conquest or territory, but a war of liberation. And today, it would finally end. Fleet Admiral Kextan watched his sensor displays with growing confusion. The human fleet facing him was smaller than expected, maybe 400 ships, impressive for a single-world species, but nowhere near enough to challenge his armada of 3,000 vessels. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human formation," his science officer reported nervously. "I've never seen readings like these before." "Prepare to engage," Kexthan ordered. "All ships commence firing when ready." That's when the lights went out, not just on his ship, but on every Nexus vessel in the fleet. 3,000 warships suddenly found their power systems failing simultaneously. Emergency lighting flickered on, but main engines died, weapons went offline, and shields collapsed. "What's happening?" Kexthan demanded. His chief engineer was frantically checking his displays. "Sir, it's some kind of directed electromagnetic pulse. But the frequency, it's specifically tuned to our power systems. They know exactly how our technology works." Admiral Sujin smiled as she watched the Nexus fleet drift helplessly in space. Project Nemesis had worked perfectly. 50 years of studying alien technology had paid off in ways the Nexus couldn't imagine. "Communications. Open a channel to all Nexus ships," she ordered. "Fleet Admiral Kexthan," her voice echoed through every disabled alien vessel. "Your fleet is now completely defenseless. Your weapons are offline, your shields are down, and your engines are dead. But we're not going to destroy you." She paused for effect. "Instead, you're going to witness the end of your empire." Across the galaxy, human fleets were emerging from hyperspace at carefully chosen targets. Not military bases or defensive installations, but the economic centers that held the Nexus Empire together. Trade stations, manufacturing worlds, and commercial hubs that had been exploiting client species for millennia. Captain Ji-Ho Lee led the assault on the Altair Commercial Complex, a massive space station that processed tribute from 40 different worlds. His ships didn't attack the station itself. Instead, they targeted the Nexus control systems while broadcasting messages to the enslaved workers inside. "Attention all non-Nexus personnel," Ji-Ho announced. "You are being liberated from Nexus control. Human forces are now in control of this station. You are free to leave or join our cause." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of alien workers who had labored under Nexus oppression for generations began cheering. Some species that humans had never encountered before were literally dancing in the corridors. But the real shock came when they started volunteering for military service. Dr. Ha-Un Park was coordinating the liberation efforts from her command center on Luna. The reports coming in were better than anyone had dared hope. "Director, we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different species," her communications officer reported. "The Altarians want to join our coalition. The Veltari are offering their entire merchant fleet, and the Zephyrians—" He paused, checking his display again. "The Zephyrians are asking if they can help us hunt down remaining Nexus forces." Ha-Un wasn't surprised. Human intelligence had been in secret contact with oppressed species throughout the galaxy for decades. The Nexus Empire had made enemies everywhere they'd gone. They'd just never faced a species capable of uniting those enemies against them. The war that was supposed to last years ended in just 14 months. Not because humanity had superior numbers or better weapons, though they had both. It ended because the Nexus Empire discovered that their entire foundation was built on fear, and fear only works until someone stands up to the bully. Colonel Min-Ho Park, now promoted to general, was leading the assault on the Nexus homeworld when the surrender came. The crystalline cities below were beautiful, but they'd been built with wealth stolen from 1,000 different worlds. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Nexus High Council," his communications officer announced. The image that appeared showed Supreme Chancellor Mordith, looking older and more fragile than his crystalline form should have allowed. "Human Commander," he said wearily, "the Nexus High Council formally surrenders all military forces and territorial claims. We request terms." General Min-Ho looked at the alien leader with something that might have been pity. "Chancellor, you don't seem to understand. We're not here to conquer your empire. We're here to dissolve it." The terms that humanity offered were unlike anything seen in galactic history. No tribute, no occupation, no revenge. Instead, every species that had been enslaved by the Nexus was offered membership in something new. The Terran Federation. Ambassador Yu Jin Han stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly, representing not just Earth, but 47 different species that had chosen to join humanity's cause. The Great Hall was filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size, all united by a single principle: the right to determine their own destiny. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, "today marks the end of the Imperial Age. No longer will advanced species prey upon the weak. No longer will economic power be used as a weapon against developing worlds. And no longer will any species face the darkness of space alone." The response was thunderous. Applause, cheers, and expressions of joy in hundreds of different languages filled the chamber. But the most important sound was silence from the former Nexus delegation. They sat quietly, perhaps finally understanding what they had lost when they chose oppression over cooperation. Admiral Hyunwoo Kim, now Supreme Commander of Federation forces, watched the ceremony from Earth. At 73, he'd lived to see humanity's greatest dream realized. Not conquest of the galaxy, but its liberation. His aide approached with the daily reports. "Sir, 3 more species have requested Federation membership. The former Nexus territories are stabilizing under local governance, and," he smiled, "we've received our first applications for Starfleet Academy from non-human students." Hyunwoo nodded with satisfaction. The Academy had been built to train humanity's warriors for the coming war. Now it would train the galaxy's protectors for the coming peace. The most remarkable thing about humanity's victory wasn't their technology or their tactics, it was their vision. While every other advanced species in the galaxy had used their power to dominate others, humans had used theirs to set others free. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And across 1,000 worlds, species that had suffered in darkness for millennia finally understood that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't advanced weapons or superior numbers. It's the infectious belief that everyone deserves to be free.